I'm back. How's it going, everybody? First, let me apologize for that really long hiatus that I've been on so far for a while now. I've got some bunch of stuff going on in my personal life, neither here nor there, but I'm back, ready to start uploading some more content. I've got a bunch of stuff coming for you. I've got my own product line launching very shortly. It's going to involve pump tops, pump and reservoir configs, reservoirs, stuff like that. It's going to be great. It's almost ready for launch. There'll be an introductory video to that. I've got the mini ITX build. That's getting worked on again. So I've got some updates for that coming. And I've got the review for the HTC 10 coming. That should be out this coming week. We'll see if we can figure out how to do this. It's either going to be here or here, one of these corners, if I can figure out how it's done. I was going over the mini ITX build, and I had asked people to let me know in the description if they would like to know on how to make your own custom reservoir, and that's what today's video is all about. We've got Leandro Zaccovici from Argentina. How's it going, man? And Bob VD Lizdonk, who both requested that I do this tutorial. So let's roll the intro and we'll get into it. Okay, guys, these are some of the things that you're going to need. This is the majority of the tools that I use and materials. You're going to need some acrylic, obviously. This is 1/8 inch thick or 3 millimeter. This is 1/4 inch thick or 5 millimeter. This one is you're definitely going to need at least this. What I like to do is I like to use both 1/4 inch and 1/8 inch if I can, just because the 1/8 inch or 3 millimeter is easier to cut and easier to work with. Speaking of cutting, you're going to need a box cutter like this with this type of razor blade on it. The straight blades that you can get for like a sticker scraper or a razor, those aren't gonna those will work, but this is just a lot easier because you can grip it really good. And you're going to want a good fresh blade as well. You don't want one that has a nick on the tip of it, because this is the primary. This is basically the where all of your cutting is going to happen. So if it's got a nick on the tip right here, flip it over. If it's chipped on both sides, get a fresh one. Just don't even bother. Get a fresh one of these. So that's the acrylics. That's the cutter. You're going to need a drill bit. This is an 11.8 millimeter drill bit. This is where you're actually going to drill the holes in, so that for your fittings to go into. If you can't find 11.8 millimeter, 29/64 will also work. It's a slightly bit smaller, but it will work just fine. I'm going to leave the links in the description for all this stuff, guys, so that way you guys can find it really easy. Another thing that you're going to need, and this is pretty crucial, this is from CyberDen. This is acrylic weld-on number 4. And you're also going to need an applicator like this. It's basically a water-thin solution, and this is what's actually going to bond the acrylics to each other. It's not actually like a sealer or a glue. Basically, what it is it's actually a kind of like a solvent. What it's going to do is, when you have your two pieces of acrylic and you have them together like this, and you apply that stuff, it's basically going to dissolve the surfaces of the acrylic, and then it's going to bond those two together. So if you're thinking that you could use things like epoxy or JB Weld or any type of RTV, even water wet from JB Weld themselves, all that stuff is not good for water. Even silicones that you buy to caulk your bathrooms with, most of that stuff isn't even. If you read the fine print on the back, it says not for direct immersion in water, meaning it will break down, it will leak, and it will release that stuff into your fluid, and it will clog your blocks. Trust me on this. I've tried it many times. It does not work. So we've got our acrylics, our drill bit, and then this is the tap that you're going to need. This is actually a $35 tap is what I paid for it. I couldn't find it locally anywhere. I had to order it online. This is the tap that's going to cut the threads for your fittings. It's actually a pipe thread. This is just that G1/4 that we all know about. This is the tap that's actually going to cut those threads. So you're going to need one of these. We got the drill bit. Now you can use a T for this. Basically you unscrew one side, this goes in it, and you screw it down and it clamps, and then there are two rods sticking out like this, and you use that to turn it so that it goes down nice and even and straight. I don't have one that's this size. I've never needed one, so that's why I don't have one. I've never needed one, so I never felt the need to actually go out and spend the money on it. Now, the reason that now going back to the types of acrylics that you need, the reason why I said that you're gonna need 1/4 inch or 5mm is the 1/8 inch is not exactly thick enough to cut your threads into. Once you've cut your threads into here, you're actually only going to get about 1.5 to 2 threads that are usable in this. So when you go and you screw your fitting in there, you know how we all like to give it that one last little just for security? Well, that last little is going to strip the threads right out of it, and then, it's basically a piece of trash. So the 1/4 inch will give you all the threads that you need all the way through to actually get a good grip without stripping the threads out. That's why I like to have both. The parts that I'm going to be putting the fittings on, I typically use 1/4 inch, and everything else I use the 1/8 inch or 3mm and 5mm respectively. So I prefer the acrylics to have, this is clear acrylic. It just has a white paper on it, so that way you can draw on it like that. I prefer the kind that has actual paper because it's easier to draw on. Also, obviously, you're going to need a pen, something to write with, or a pencil, marker. You're going to need something to measure with, and something to give you straight lines. Now, your cutting surface. You do want a flat surface. You preferably wood. The reason for that is if you say go ahead and use your tile floor, you're not really going to nick that up with your razor blade. But what is going to happen is when you go and you cut and you make your slices across, you're going to want to start off the acrylic and end off of the acrylic. So you're actually going to be coming off and you're going to be cutting into your surface. You're going to be putting nicks there like that. So if you use a hard surface like a tile floor or something like that, when you slip off and you hit like this, that's what's going to give you that chip in the end of your razor blade. And then that's no good. You're going to have to, do one of these things like this, and that's always a pain in the butt. You're also going to want a nice straight edge for actually doing your cutting. Now, I don't like to use the metal rulers because they're very thin and you don't get a very good grip on them. So what I like to use is, this is just a piece of wood. It's a scrap shelf from a piece of cheap furniture. I basically lay it down like this, and that gives me a good, so that I could sit here like this with it and put a lot of pressure on it. If I was using one of those thin metal rulers, I'd only be able to do like this, and say you're making your cut and the thing goes like this. Uh-oh, now you're screwed. So if it's like this, put a nice good pressure on it, and you can go ahead and make your cut, make your slice, and this thing's not going anywhere. You can see it's nice and firm. It's not going to go anywhere. You're going to get a good straight cut. Because now this is how you're going to be cutting the acrylic. This is an 1/8 inch thick. Typically you want, when you make your slices across it, typically the ideal situation is to have it cut through 1/4 of the thickness of your actual acrylic. So this is 1/8 inch thick. I found that 20 passes with the razor blade is good enough, and 1/4 inch acrylic, I've found that 30 to 40 passes is just enough. You're going to need a good straight edge like this, because that way when after you're done making your cuts, you can put it right up against the edge, and we're going to snap it off just like that. Now, I'm sure you can see other videos where people use things like band saws, jigsaws, and other types of saws to cut that. Those are all fine and dandy, but not a lot of people have those things or have access to those things. So what I'm giving you guys a tutorial on is what you can do with what you can get your hands on. Everybody can get their hands on one of these, and a drill bit, a piece of wood, a nice flat surface to work on. So this, and it does work. There's no problem with it. The last thing you're going to need to get your hands on is various grits of sandpaper. This is 80 grit, 180, 220, 320, 8 and 800. Now you can, and then this is also, what is this? This is 1500. Now, depending on which surface you're doing, you do want a good, clean surface. You don't want any jaggedness. You don't want any impurities in this. So that, because when the two pieces come together, if there's a space in between anywhere, that stuff is not a filler. It's not going to fill it up. So you're going to have a leak there. So you need a nice, flat, straight surface. So I believe that's everything as far as preparation is concerned. Let's go ahead and start cutting. Okay, so I have this piece, and I have some holes pre-drilled into this, and I'm going to get to that in just a minute. So hang on for that. But basically, this is how I'm going to make my reservoir. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to mark off. Let me find a straighter edge. There we go. So this is going to be the part that has the fittings on it. So I'm going to have an in and an out. So what we're going to do is we're going to measure out all the pieces that we need. So this one particular one here, I'm actually just going to do this. So this is one side, this is going to be the other. Now I have my marks made. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead, put my straight edge like that, and then you're going to take your blade and you're going to go ahead and make your cuts. Now you're going to want to go all the way across. I know it only comes to here, but you're going to want to go all the way across. So you're going to have a little bit of scrap right here. You can put that off the side and you can actually save that. I'll show you what you can do with that later on in this tutorial. But basically, line it up like that, and now your 20 passes, right? Start off of the acrylic and end off of the acrylic. Okay, there's our 20 passes. But you can see that there's a line going straight across. Now, for that straight edge that I told you about, you're going to put this right there, right up against the edge. And I like to take this too, to give it some reinforcement on the other side, and you're just going to snap it, just like that. And then there's paper on both sides, so this side's going to stay there. So we're just going to slice this off. Okay. Now there's the one piece. See where we cut it? It's nice. It's fairly straight. Definitely needs some sanding. Now, same thing for this side. And snap. Cut this off. There we are. And we can see right here, other than this corner here, because this is just another piece of scrap that I'm using for this demonstration, we're actually going to come above that. We have an identical piece for the other side of our reservoir, and you can go ahead and peel this off if you would like. There we go. Have an exact duplicate. And then now that we have that, we're going to need to make the sides, the bottom, and the top. Let's say you're making this for the back of your computer case, the back of your case, where the drive cages would normally be. And let's say you only have enough space for 80 centimeters. Okay, so you're going to want 8 centimeters here, and then you want to draw a second one. Eight centimeters. Okay, now you have two lines, and all you really have to do is get a straight edge. I like using one of these things. They're very handy. You go ahead and you line up the two lines like that. So now you have a straight line going across. Like that. Okay. Now, so what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut this. Same procedure. Okay guys, I apologize. My camera card ran out of space and I didn't realize it, and I continued on going. I finished the two sides and one of the tops. So let's go back and show you guys what I did, you know, when the thing was full. We left off with cutting the sides. So I measured the height that was required, and then I went ahead and cut a big slice of it. The depth that we needed. And then I went ahead and measured the height of it that I needed, and I made another cut that way. I did that with two pieces, and then from the leftovers I made the top. Now, one thing that I didn't capture. Okay, so here's where it starts to get a little bit tricky here. Now, we know how wide this piece is. However, now for our top and our bottom pieces, the width has changed because we are overlapping these sides onto this side of the front and the back. So now this 3mm acrylic is actually going to make that wider. So we have to add a total of 6mm to our width from this. So if we measure it again, the width of this is this is 35 millimeters, so we have to add 6 to make it 39. So what I went ahead and did was, from the pieces that were leftovers from when we cut these, it's already the right height, the right length. However, we needed to add the 6mm onto it, so that made it 35 plus 6 is 41. So this is actually 41 millimeters. 41 millimeters, you can see it right there. So I'm going to go, so now basically now that we have the top, we can just duplicate, make an exact copy for the bottom. So make sure that the edge is lined up like that. Take your pen, make the line, and then same procedure again. And there we have it. So now we have our back, our front, our two sides, top, and our back. So now, how do we get them together? Okay, so one other thing is I like to actually drill these holes for the ins and the outs if I can before I put it together. However, sometimes you kind of have to put it together and then fit it into place, and then you can actually figure out where they want to go. Now in this situation, I needed to, I just went ahead and pre-drilled these holes just so I could demonstrate to you guys you know, how to properly drill these holes. Once you have your drill bit, ignore the tape. This is just a marker for another project I was working on. You got to make sure that you have a drill that's going to handle this size shank on it. This is a 1/2 inch shank. I don't have a drill this size, so I actually took this to my work and I used a drill press. But a regular drill, like a DeWalt drill or anything like that, will work just fine. You just gotta try to keep it as straight as you possibly can. Drill press, again, if you have one available to you, that's perfect. If not, a regular drill will work just fine. Just keep it nice and straight. You just touch it. You gotta keep going up and down like this. This is called pecking. And what this is doing is you gotta get those chips out of there. So you drill down and you lift it up, those chips come out, and then you keep going. Now once you get close to the end, once you get very close to going through, You have to lighten up on it. You have to start poking through very slowly, or else what's going to happen.
Okay, so as you can see right here, this is what I'm talking about. You see these little tiny, when you compare it to the other one, this one's nice and round. This one has all these little fractures on this side of the acrylic. Now you can see here with the drill, there's these two flutes. Now as you're drilling through, it's all fine and dandy. You got to keep pecking at it like this to clear those chips out, so that way you're not recutting the chip. You got to get them out. But as you're starting to come through, it's going to cut a little hole through, and then these two flutes here, what that's going to do is it's going to grab onto the acrylic and literally snap it off as it pokes all the way through. And what happens when it does that is it fractures the plastic right around here. So if you just go nice and slow, you peck at it to get those chips out, but then you'll be able to feel it once you start hitting this other side and you start to poke through. That's when you got to start easing up on your pressure. If you go nice and slow and you keep lifting up and down on it like that, you'll get a nice and even push through with your bit, and it'll keep it cleaned up all nice and neat. And it's not going to grab the acrylic on this side and snap it like it did on this side. Now when we get to assembling this thing, I'm actually going to show you a way of kind of fixing this. It has worked for me with varying degrees of success. But again, it's in this situation, it hasn't actually broken anything off of the surface, but it has fractured it. So when we go in there and we start tapping it with the tap, it could break those off. And if this is your outside and your fitting is going to go on this side, then it might not actually seal properly. So once we get to assembling, I'm going to show you a way of kind of remedying that. But for now, we're going to continue on with getting this together. Okay, assembly. I'm going to go ahead and tear off all this white. Okay, so here you can kind of see right along the edges where we cut it, it's not flat. It's got a little bit of a texture to it, and on some of them you can even feel right on the edge there's a bit of a lip. Now these are what's not going to be able to seal because it needs to be completely flat. Now that's where the sandpaper comes in. Now this part, guys, is yeah, the really crappy part, sanding. It sucks. So I'm going to go ahead and go do that, get everything nice and sanded, and then we're going to come back and we're going to get this thing assembled. So be back in a bit. So now we're back. All of our edges are nice and smooth. I ended up only using 80 grit, and then I jumped up to 320 grit, and that gave me a nice smooth finish. The 80 grit was to knock down all of the rough edges and all the large stuff, and then the 220 just smoothed it over to give it a nice smooth surfaces. Now we're going to be putting these two things together. This is the front piece with the holes in it. Now, I would recommend doing this on a flat surface, as always. You want to put some tape on this piece, so that way it does not move while you're putting this together. Now, we are going to be gluing this piece onto this like this. So that's the right way. If we flipped this up and laid this down and then laid this against this surface, that'll work, but it'll end up in a not so good finish, because what's going to happen is when you put this stuff onto the seam here, it's going to go run all the way through, and it's going to get onto your work surface, and it's going to flow underneath of the thing, and it's not going to give you a good result. You're going to have to sand and polish and all that. So you want the part that you are going to be bonding on the top. You don't want it on your work surface. Now this is the 1/4 inch or 4 millimeter, so this is going to pretty much stand on its own. However, what I still like to do is get some tape, and you want to tape it like this. Okay. Now the reason you don't want to wrap the tape around and come back from this side is because once the stuff goes in here, it's going to run through and it's going to go in under your tape, and that again is going to spread it on the surface, which is not going to do any good. Now that we know that it is straight up and down and perfectly level, you need this as an applicator, because this stuff is water thin. Let me actually zoom out a little bit. This stuff is water thin, so you need an applicator like this. It's got a very fine needle type end of it. Now if you go and you just turn this stuff upside down, like for instance over here, you can see it's just pouring out because it's liquid thin. So what you want to do, a little trick, is, now this is going to take some practice. Give it a little bit of a squeeze to push some air out, and you can release some of the pressure and turn it upside down again. Now you can see that the air pressure is holding it in. And that's how you can go ahead and make sure that you're not going to drip it all over the place. So now you can see the white line here, because that's the edge of the acrylic. It's got a nice white line to it. As we add this to it, it is going to suck it in, and you'll see that disappear. Ready? There we go. Okay, there we go. Now you can see, as far as we can go, it has basically sucked it all in. There's a couple of spots where it didn't pull it in, so we're just going to leave this sit for a minute to let it set up a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and add a little bit more so it sucks it in again. Actually, you know what? I think we can do that right now and see how it works. Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. That's actually finished. The white line that you're seeing now is the edge of this piece of acrylic. So now that has sucked it all in, and we're just going to leave that sit for about 5 or 10 minutes before we handle it, just so that way it gets a good bond. So we'll be back in about 10 minutes. Okay guys, it has now actually only been 5 minutes, and you can see we actually have a good strong bond. Now I'm going to show you this. I goofed. Get this to focus in. You can see right here, a little bit bled through back here and ran underneath of our workpiece here, which is okay. It's not too bad. If you do happen to have that, you can go ahead and try some isopropylene alcohol and wipe off as much as you can, and then just don't worry about the rest. We'll worry about that once the project is finished. I'm going to show you how to fix this, so that way it's not all ugly like that. So here we are again. Zoom back out. Alright guys, goof number 3. I forgot to hit record. That's my mistake. But you didn't miss too much. We're going to be basically what we did was the exact same method that we did for this side. We laid it down like this, taped it down, ran a piece of tape across it, so that way this piece will actually help support this piece. We ran the tape all the way around, put this side on, put our stuff in there. It bonded within a couple of minutes. So we took our top piece, put it down, taped it down just like we did with the other piece, and then we took the whole assembly, the bottom and the 2 sides, laid it right down on top of it, you know, kind of like pretend this is the other side. Put that down like that, taped it down, then we just took the rest of the assembly, laid it down on top, and we got a perfect match for both sides, so that way we know we got perfect 90-degree angles on both of our sides. Went in, laid the stuff down, and within a minute or 2 I was able to lift it up and handle it, and it is now, we're probably about 7 minutes ago is when this happened, and everything it's rock solid. It's one piece now. Now, I did goof again. Now, we already knew about this piece. This was just a piece of scrap that I pulled up just so I could put this tutorial for you together. So I probably should have cut this off from the beginning. Here we are. This is my mistake. I should have done this beforehand. But then again, you guys can learn from my mistake. Preparation is key. Always make sure you're prepared beforehand. But the intention was to just, leave it like that, and then put everything together, and then just put the piece on. However, the back piece I cut too long, so that's not going to work. So I'm going to have to cut this off, and as long as I'm at it, I might as well just cut this off as well. I'm probably just going to use like a hacksaw or something like that just to cut through. Now that we have this thing all together, if you can see, we can get this to focus in. Come on. There we go. You can see that on the edges, when we sanded these pieces down, we actually slightly rounded the corners. So for when this piece comes to this, it's slightly rounded right here. So what we now have to do is, now that this is together, we're going to have to sand it like this. So we're probably going to just take that with some 80 grit and then jump it up to 320 grit, just like we did when we sanded all of the edges down. Just going to sand it just like this. That'll make sure that this side is completely level. For when we put our top piece on, you'll have a good solid bond. And the same thing for on the bottom. After I cut these off, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Sand this side down, so when we put our bottom piece on, we have a perfectly good bond as well. Now, while we're at it, I'm going to show you this. See if I can zoom in on this. You can actually inspect your bond now. There we go. You can see that there are some very, very small micro bubbles in here. One of the things that you can do to prevent that, once you get a little bit better at this, is once you apply the acrylic weld, you can actually clamp it with some clamps, and that'll press all of the air out. But this is no big deal. If you actually look at a store-bought, like say a Bay style Reservoir, if you look really closely at the edges, you would think that they machined the entire thing out of one piece. How did they get those two pieces together? If you look very, very closely, you might actually find a bubble or two just like this in the edges. But what they did was they clamped it just like that to get all of the air out. And there might be one or two left behind that you can't get out, but that's unavoidable. You can't even really see it anyway. Now the one thing you do have to look out for is if you do have a large air bubble, like say you didn't sand this completely flat, there was a small imperfection in the surface level. If you have an air bubble that goes from one side to the other, then that's a problem, because you're gonna have fluid leaking out. What I would recommend is just give this about 10 minutes, then it'll be completely cured and finished, all of that. And you can go ahead and put a couple drops with that acrylic weld in there. It'll suck it in. Leave it sit for 5 to 10 minutes. Or if you want to, if you have any clamps, you can even clamp it. Or if if you have enough thumb strength, you can sit there and squeeze it and hold it like that to get all the air bubbles out of it and put the two pieces together. That'll help bond it as well. If all else fails, you could redo the entire thing. Or there's one other thing that I've found. It's kind of a cheating way of doing things, but it has worked for me. When you sand, you're getting a lot of dust, acrylic dust, from when you're sanding. What you can do is save that dust. Just pick up your sandpaper, kind of tap it off on the edge of the table somewhere, and just leave it there. Then what you can do is you can take like a small flat blade screwdriver, scoop some of it up, and try packing it into the hole, because all that really is just acrylic anyway. It's just powder. And then you can take your acrylic weld, put a couple drops onto it. It should suck it in, dissolve the acrylic dust, and make a bond. It's not going to look perfect, but it is an alternative that you can do. I found that the best thing to do is just, when you're sanding, don't skimp out. Just keep sanding. You want that perfect, nice, smooth finish. That is key. And then you'll end up with a finish just like this, where there's no large bubbles, no gaps, and everything just fits together and it's rock solid. So I'm going to go ahead and sand the sides and cut these tabs off, and then I'll be back and we'll go ahead and put the rest of it together, and then we'll go ahead and show you how to do the tapping. So be back in a bit. Alright, now we're back. Got everything nice and sanded down. I cut the edges off like I said I was going to. I sanded both sides down with 80 grit followed by 320 grit just to give it a smooth. There's no empty cavities in the corners. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to put on our next piece. Now I'm going to do this in a little bit differently than we did before, just because if you say you put it on like that and then you try going on the inside to get the stuff in here, you're going to make a huge mess. And chances are you're probably going to be making a reservoir a lot bigger than this anyway, so you're probably going to have enough room to get in there and do it. So what I'm basically going to do is I'm just going to put it like this, and then I'm going to very slowly put it on there, and I'm not going to turn the thing completely upside down. I'm just going to basically, if you watch the level of the fluid, you hold this here, and then just as it starts to come out, just like that, follow along, and you watch it suck in, and that's good. So I'm just going to let this sit for just a minute or two while that sets up, just so that way when I lift my finger off, this piece doesn't move and then, causes some ugliness. But it's actually really cool. You can watch the stuff going in there as you're putting it in. I'm actually going to put a little pressure on that to get air bubbles out. Just hold it like this for a few minutes and it should set up shortly. Okay, I think we have a good seal there. Okay, now that's on and it's not going to go anywhere. Now we can go ahead and handle it so we can get a little bit more precise. You can actually bring your face in a little bit closer. So what we're going to do is we're just going to put there like that. You can actually watch it. Like, I just put a little bit in this corner right here and I actually watched the entire corner fill up. So that's when we're going to stop and we're going to head and move on to another section. You want to make sure that you have the point of the applicator right up against the edges. And there we go. Okay. That. Okay, looks like we have a little bit of a gap right here. So I'm going to go ahead and put some pressure on this. What that's going to do is it's going to squeeze out, it's going to squeeze it, it's going to squish. And it's going to get rid of any air bubbles. And there's a little bit of a gap right here, so I could have used a belt sander that would have gotten this sanded a lot faster and a much more precise thing. However, I'm trying to use as little bit of tools that most people do not have available to them as necessary. I'm trying to do this in a way that, a method so that in a way that everybody is able to do it, because everybody has access to, their hands. Everybody can have access to a box cutter, a pair of pliers, tape, things like that. Not everybody has access to, say, a drill press or a bandsaw or a belt sander. So I'm trying to do this in such a way that anybody can tackle a job like this. So any mistakes that I make is a lesson that you guys have learned. Okay, and I believe we're good. That's a little better. So as you can see, there was a gap here, but now there's not, because I put some pressure on it that closed the gap, and the acrylic bonded the two pieces together. Okay, now that we're at this stage, now is if you're going to be using a hand drill to do your drilling for your holes, now is a perfect time, because you've got the structural rigidity of the thing. Now this is not coming apart. I actually already dropped this once on a tile floor and absolutely nothing happened. So now is a perfect time to go ahead and do your drilling. And now, as far as the fracturing, I told you that I'm going to show you a little trick that sometimes works, but also sometimes doesn't. Basically what the fractures are, there's no actual chips missing from the plastic. It's basically just little tiny cracks. You can use this to try and fix those cracks. You just try to go ahead and put some of this in there. It's going to suck it into all of the cracks, and it's going to rebond them together. Now chances are you're still going to be able to see them, but they will at least, get that off of there. Yeah, if you go ahead and get some on the surface, you can wipe it off real quickly with your fingers. This stuff is not going to hurt anything. Here, watch this, ready? Got a bunch on my finger, see it there? It's not an adhesive, it's literally gone, it just evaporated. So, that's that. Okay, so let's go ahead and start tapping these holes, and then we'll go ahead and do a leak test. Alright guys, we're back. This is actually day 2. The battery in the camera died, so I had to give it a little bit of a recharge. Where we left off is where we were about to start cutting the threads into the holes. So you want to grab your tap and your wrench. Like I said before, you can use a T-handle. That might work better for some people. For me, when I first started doing it, this was actually the best way for me. Plus, I don't have a T-handle for this size. Never needed one, so I never went and bought one. That's why I don't have one. I actually use a different method. I use a centering punch in a drill press, and I press it down into here, and what that does is once it's on the hole like this, that actually centers it up perfectly 100% perpendicular, so I get a perfect straight all the way through. But once I first started experimenting, this is the method that I worked with, and I got usually 99% of the time it was perfect. Once in a great while it was a little bit off, but no, again, if this is just for you, then it's going to work just fine. Even if it is slightly off to an angle, again, not the end of the world. I'm going to show you a way of remedying that and hope so that it doesn't leak. And probably your friends won't even notice anyway. They'll be too excited that, dude, you made your own reservoir. That's so cool. But essentially, you want to get this into here as straight up as you can. And a little bit of lube does go a long way. I sprayed a little bit of WD-40 on this. So you want to get that on there nice and straight, like this. You just kind of want to eyeball it. Make sure you get it as straight as possible. Now when you start to turn this in, you are going to hear some creaking and some crackling at first. What that is the first couple of threads are biting into the plastic and they're starting to cut the threads. So if you hear a little cracking and all that, that's actually normal. Just eyeball it so it's nice and straight, and you want to start slow. Yep, hear that? That's the crackling. So you just want to try to keep it nice and straight. Put a little bit of pressure on it, and as you got to keep watching it too, because as you're turning with the wrench, you're actually putting an offset pressure on one side of the tap. That's why those T-handles come in handy. You put an even turning force on from all directions. Just go nice and slow. Take your time. Now right at about this point I've gone all the way around one time, and right around at this point you've basically already started cutting your threads. So now the tap is going to follow the hole and the direction that you're going in. And I don't know if you can see this on camera. Let's see if I can get this lined up. I am at a slight bit of an angle right here. See, I'm not perfectly straight. So what you can do, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't, is give a little bit of a turn, but you want to give it a little tiny bit of force in the opposite direction that it's leaning at, and that sometimes straightens it up. But then again, if it's not too bad, I'm going to show you how to remedy that once we get to the part of putting the fittings in. And you want to keep going until the tap goes all the way through. Once it gets through, it's going to get it's going to get a lot easier to turn. You just want to make sure you go through a good amount, like that, just to make sure that you've got all your threads and all the little shavings have broken free, and then you can start backing it back out. There we have it. Let's see if I can. Well, you can kind of see. You can see that we've cut our threads. So I'm going to go ahead and do these other two holes, and then we'll go ahead and see what we got. And there we go. All three of these holes are threaded. So let's go ahead and test one out. Okay. This is actually not bad. This is the one that that was going in slightly crooked. It's actually not bad. And you can even see, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you guys to see this, but since this is clear, you can see the seal. And if you look closely at the seal, you can actually see that it's pressed all the way up against the plastic. So that's actually a good seal. And if you look at it from this side, if you look very closely, you can kind of see that there's a slight angle to it, but you can barely even see it. Now let's try our other two. Yep, there we go. That's another good seal all the way around. Last one. Yep. Actually, this one is a little bit more angled. If we can, if we line this right up like this, you can kind of see it's at a little bit more of an angle. This is, now if you look at the seal, it is contacting the acrylic. What you can do is, you know that extra little that we all like to give. Just take a pair of pliers. Just give a last little just like we all like to give. And we do have a good seal all the way around, but you can definitely see it's not as, the O-ring is not squished as much as it is over here. One thing that you can do to remedy that. Now this is going to seal. That's not an issue. But one way to kind of help with that issue is this stuff. This is called plumber's tape. It's just a very, very thin white stuff. It's basically like a rubber, or kind of like an RTV. You can take a piece of it, fold it in half, like that. And now when you apply this stuff, you're basically going to wrap it around the thread, so you're going to seal the threads. Now there actually is a method to do this. When you turn it, you're going to turn it in like this to put it in. So if you wrap it this way, when you're turning it, the edge of the tape will catch the threads and it can come off. So you want to wrap it the opposite way of the threads so that it overlaps the other side, like that. And then it is going to be a slight tighter fit, but it's going to be okay because that just means that the threads are actually sealing. Give it that one last little that we all like. And now the threads are 100% sealed, and it is definitely not going to leak now. Now we already know that it's not going to leak, so I'm actually going to go ahead and remove that, because now what we can do is we can go ahead and rinse it out, get out all the stuff. When you're putting everything together, one thing I forgot to mention is clean everything before you go and start applying your acrylic weld. Just a little bit of warm water and soap, like dish detergent goes great. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, then we'll be back. We'll put the last piece on. We're going to fill it up, give it a leak test, and then we'll come back for some final thoughts. So, be back in a sec. Okay guys, an hour's time has passed. I'm going to go ahead and fill this sucker up and let's see if we can find some leaks. Hopefully there won't be. Alright, no leaks here. I'm going to go ahead and cap off all three of these, so that way we can check our holes. Okay, everything's dry, all the edges. This was just a little bit of spillage from when I filled it up. Check it out, no leaks, all sealed up. And this is perfectly okay to be completely submerged in water, because we didn't use any glue to seal this together. We bonded the pieces of acrylic together. And there's no air bubbles in the seams, at least no large ones. Alright, let's empty this out and show you how to clean up our little goof over here. Okay guys, now that we know that we have a good reservoir, solid and sealed, let's go ahead and fix our goof. Now, did you think that you were done sanding? Wrong. More sanding. The best way to avoid having to do more sanding and finishing is to not make goofs like this. However, it does happen. Sometimes it's just something unavoidable. But the thing to know is what to do when it does happen. So I'm about to show you that now. So the things that you're going to need are, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to use 320, 800, then I'm going to wet sand with 1500, and then I like to use this for when you're polishing, because even if after you wet sand, it's still going to have a dull tone to it, so you're going to need to polish it. I use Blue Magic Metal Polish Cream. It's more for things like chrome, aluminum, more for metal, but it's the exact same thing as any other polish. It works amazing. Just don't take a big whiff of it. It's got a strong ammonia smell to it, and it just works amazing. You're going to get a crystal clear finish. It might even look better than it does now when you're done. Now we only have this small area. However, you can't do just one small area. If you're going to try and do that, it's not going to be an even finish. So you are going to need to sand this down until the imperfection's gone, and then do the entire panel. So let's go ahead and do that. Alright, sanding done. That actually didn't take long. It was actually very easy. And we can see that our blemish that we made is no longer even here. It's all gone. You can see if you compare this side to this side, it's got a very dull finish to it. It's because we're not finished yet. The polishing is going to bring this to a crystal clear. You want to use a nice microfiber cloth. You can pick both of these up at any automotive store, or you can buy them online. And then basically you just get some on your towel, and you just start rubbing it in. You can see, there we go. We've got our crystal clear finish back. Same as the other side. Same as this side. Now I am a little bit I like to take things a little bit overboard, and I like to do it a second time, and then I actually like to go and do the entire thing, just to make sure that there's no, because you know how acrylic is pretty easily scratched. So I just like to go over the entire thing just to make sure that there's no little micro scratches in the plastic. Basically what this polish is, it has some very fine micro grit in it. You can't feel it, can't see it, it just feels like a cream, but it is in there. And it's basically like an extremely fine sandpaper, probably equivalent to, I'd say, 3000 grit sandpaper, which you can also do. You could probably get away with just wet sanding this all the way down to 3000 grit sandpaper, and you would probably be fine. But I prefer this method because it gets all inside the little cracks and everything else. So just like that, just go over the entire thing. Just give it a little on your towel, rub it in, nice and good. Wipe it off, and you'll get a nice, perfect, near flawless surface finish on the entire thing.
Okay guys, let's talk about what just happened here for a minute. First of all, I'd like to say that this is not perfect. Please don't take this as an indication of my quality of work. The intention of this video was to show you guys what you can do at home for if you wanted to make your own, start making your own acrylic parts. You can do this at home. And your first time is probably most likely not going to be perfect, as this thing is not perfect. You can see the pieces aren't cut perfectly. I could have sanded things down more, made things more smoother. I have a CNC machine. I could have just had the machine, designed all these pieces and had the machine cut it for me, so everything would have been perfect. To the T, to the thousandths of an inch, it would have been perfect. So you also might be asking yourself, okay, so what you're telling me is that it's going to cost me more money and time to make my own reservoir that probably won't be perfect the first time I do it, as when I could just buy a reservoir. The short answer, yes, it will cost you more time and money to make one. But what you can't buy is the skill set that you just learned. You're not limited to just making a reservoir. And once you have, the knowledge and the know-how to do this, you can start thinking a little bit more creatively. Like, for instance, you don't have to use clear acrylic. You could use any color you want. You could, this is white acrylic. You could have, say this is going to fit into your case like this. You could have used white acrylic for the back panel and then made the rest in clear. Now this is 30% light translucent, so 30% of light that you shine at this will shine through. So you could have done it like this and put some LEDs in here, and like say some red or blue, green, whatever color you wanted to, and the light would transfer through. Preferably you want to use like white or red or something darker, but the light would have transferred through it, and the back of your reservoir would have been all lit up like that, and then whatever fluid you have in there, that light would have then shined through. So you can use white acrylic, green acrylic, blue acrylic, any color acrylics you want. They even have mirrored acrylics where it's acrylic but it's mirrored on one side of it. You can do things like, for instance, this. This is just some pieces that I took from the scrap pieces that were left over from this. All I did was using the exact same method. I just used the razor blade and a straight edge. I measured everything out, and I cut everything, and I used the acrylic weld to bond this all together. And now I have this cool little air intake or exhaust type looking thing. I could glue this somewhere else. I could even go ahead and put this right here, and maybe put some LEDs inside of here so it looks like hot air is venting out as your water is trickling through. It's like, say if you put this in like this, you could fill it up so that your water line is right about here, so that way it looks like hot air is coming out of here and you've got red coolant trickling around like that. So you're not limited to just making a reservoir. You can start thinking more outside of the box, and with the skill set that you have, you can start making custom components. Like say you have your case, okay, you have your motherboard, your graphics card, your fancy new reservoir that you just made. So it just that's awesome. That's freaking great. I want you guys to actually comment and start telling me what you guys did if you guys used this method. Now you can start making your own custom panels. Like say if you have a case that has the bottom of it is an open bottom case, you can see your power supply and the cables that are coming out of it. Now what you can do is you can take your acrylic, measure from the back of the case to the front of your power supply, cut, then you can measure from the top of your power supply down to the bottom, cut, and then you can bond the two together, and now you have this cool custom shroud that's going to go over top of your power supply and hide your power supply, hide your wires. If you wanted to show off the label for your power supply, you could do the same thing, but just cut a window in it so that way everybody can see what power supply you're using. It's not like it's not just, oh, I spent a whole lot of money and I got a reservoir that's not perfect. Don't think like that. You got to start thinking more and more and more open, out of the box. Open your mind a little bit more. And if worst comes to worst, you're trying this out, you're working on something, you're getting frustrated because it's not working out just right. Come back to this video, leave a comment, tell me what you're doing, what you're working on. Give me some dimensions and things, give me an idea of what you're working on, and tell me what the problem is, and I'll work with you. I'm not just here to make a bunch of videos and make some money on ad revenue, which is basically nothing. But I will work with you on whatever it is that you're working on. And even if this is something that you would like to have something custom like this in your case, but it's not something you don't have the money to invest in the thing of acrylic weld, a $30 tap, a wrench, all the other stuff that you need to do this. Say you don't have the time or the money to invest in that. Let me know what you're doing and I'll make it for you. And I'm not even going to charge you $1 million. I'm not here to make a bajillion dollars on this. I'm here for you guys, the community. Whatever cost of parts in 20 bucks, let's say. I don't care. Like say you want something that has cool little water trails in it. Let me know what you're working on and I'll make it for you. What else you can also do? What I would really love for you guys to do is go follow me on Instagram. It's CyberDen_systems. You could put pictures up and tag me in pictures. Have my direct messenger is turned on. You can directly send me pictures and messages, and I'll work with you guys on whatever it is that you're working on. So I believe that's actually going to sum it up for this video. I hope you guys liked the tutorial. You know, obviously, I'd love a thumbs up. But again, you know, whatever it is you're working on, let me know. I really want to see what you guys are doing, and maybe I'll even I'll do a video on what you guys are doing, and you know, we could talk about it and say, you know, we could do this, we can do that, and I'll work with you on that again. We'll do a whole new video on what you guys are doing using this method. So again, till next time, I've got my HTC 10 review coming out shortly, so stay tuned for that, and I will see you guys next time. Dan out.